Tariq Ali. I was president in Trinity, 1965. It was pre the big explosions of the 60s. You had the Beatles playing at Magdalen Ball, but no one cared that much because they weren't so huge. So the radical rock stars were attracting people, but not in the way they did later. There was growing anger on issues like apartheid and racism. I had just arrived at Oxford. The President of the Union had invited the South African ambassador, Carol DeWitt, to come and give a talk organized not by the Union, but by the Oxford University Conservative Club. So we said we're not going to let him enter the Union. You know, this is not a Union meeting. And so his car was stopped outside the Union, and a lot of decaying vegetables were thrown at him. He was really pelted with them, and they drove off. The next day, 6 of us were summoned by the senior proctors. You have brought the good name of the university into disrepute, and for that you will be sent down for the remainder of the term. And I said, can we reply? He said, yes. So I said, surely if anyone takes this event seriously, you would say that those who invited this disgusting gentleman to come and speak at a Conservative Club meeting with a room booked in the Union, that he has brought the good name of the university into disrepute. That's enough, he said, out. Had the Oxford Union invited this guy, he would have been debated with, he would have been replied to, he would have been dealt with inside the debating chamber. You know, take them on. Always been my advice. And the debates we had when I was president did debate everything under the sun, things which are very relevant today, like immigration. We were debating in 65, and people said, don't invite this Tory MP, Cyril Osborne. I said, why? He's a fascist. I said, well, look, I don't know about that. He may be very right-wing, but let's debate him. And Brian Walden, the Labour MP, came and demolished him. Always the best way. I restaged that this house will not fight for Queen and country. And that, for some reason, it became a huge issue, so huge that this building almost shook.
I now call upon Mr. Rip Bulkley, Exeter Treasurer, to move the motion standing in his name.
Each individual should only be asked to take the lives of his fellow men, and perhaps to give his own life as well, for some principle that he believes in as an individual, and not just because he has been asked to do so by Crown and Parliament.
The tabloids went crazy. Time magazine covered the debate. Sir David Lindsay Clear, 70, barked blimpishly, I have served my Queen and country from 1915 to 1917, and I object to being told what to do by someone who comes from a country which has no allegiance to the Crown. We might have to take advice from Eskimos and Hottentots next.
And indeed, it is no accident that the men who passed this motion in 1933 were among those brave men who fought against fascism in the last war. For of course it was such men as this who were among the first in this country to realize the issues of principle at stake between themselves and fascism.
The memories of the 1933 debate, because this was not long after the war, became very pronounced. And I had lots of letters. And one of the nicest letters I got was from D.M. Graham. He writes, as Secretary of the Union in February 1933, and first to find in my hand and scribble on the back of an envelope the words of the King and Country motto, I may perhaps owe you and the Union some explanation of the rumpus which I so unwittingly helped to cause. And he reminds us that when Randolph Churchill came to the Union in February 1933 and made a sincere, deeply felt but unsuccessful speech, the steward of the society, Mr. Bird, said, "It's a pity Mr. Randolph Churchill never took the trouble to get his bad speeches over when he was an undergraduate."
Abstentions 8. 48. There having voted against the motion 493 members, and for the motion 466 members.
So that Queen and Country debate inspired having a big teaching on Vietnam at the Union. So we did, and the British Foreign Secretary showed up. Henry Cabot Lodge, US ambassador to the UN, turned up. People from the right and the left, and that too was televised by the BBC. So, we established a sort of mood for these things to be taken seriously. Then later on, in 1966, when I was no longer president of the Union, but that whole milieu was around, the BBC decided to organize the first ever transatlantic debate via cable, which was Oxford versus Harvard. So I got a phone call from Sir Hugh Carlton Green's office saying, we're organizing this. You'll be at the BBC studios here, and the Harvard lot will be in the CBS studios in Harvard or New York. So I said, why don't we do it from the Oxford Union? He said, no, you have to come to the studio because this is the first time we're trying it. And the debate was on the Vietnam War. And I said, well, obviously we're going to oppose the Americans. And Hugh Carlton Green, I can't quite imagine a BBC Director General saying this today. He said, of course we are. There's no question about it, and hammer them into the ground. So those were our marching orders from the boss of the BBC, and we proceeded to do precisely that. Malcolm was invited by my predecessor as president, Eric Abrahams, and no one objected, not the Tories, nobody. We were hard put to find someone to oppose him. Finally, Humphrey Berkeley, a very liberal Conservative member of Parliament, agreed. It was Eric's farewell debate, and he'd asked me that when I get off to speak, I want you to take the chair, so Malcolm has solidarity all the way through. I said, fine. But so I was sitting next to Malcolm during that debate, and the subject was extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. Moderation in the pursuit of something or the other is no virtue. And he gave an absolutely brilliant speech. And Humphrey Berkeley had made a foolish mistake. It was a very charged atmosphere. You know, most young people, white, sitting in that hall, had no idea what the life of black people in the United States was like, or the impact slavery had left behind, or what it meant to be black in the United States. So they were, like this when Malcolm was speaking, explaining to them. And then Humphrey Berkeley had asked a really dumb question, saying, why you Malcolm X, why not Malcolm A, B, Z, Y, as a joke. Very few people laughed. And Malcolm's reply was devastating. He said, I have no name. My real name is Malcolm Little, which is the name of the slaveholder who bought my family. And that's why some of us prefer to have initials, because we'd rather not be surnamed after the slaveholders. You can just pin drop silence. And he carried on and got a standing ovation. Then he came and sat next to me and clutched my hand and said, was that all right? I said, you could see whether it was all right or not. Just look at them. You basically sort of completely wowed them. It's an experience they'll never forget, and that has remained the case. The stature of that debate has grown with every passing 5 years or decades.